Sketchy old man. Sorry for the length. This is my first story on here, and I wanted to make sure no details were left out. This summer, my dad, brother, and I had an awesome trip planned to go to Europe. Before flying overseas, we had to make a connecting flight from our smaller city to the Los Angeles International Airport. I'm from California. For me, this was a new experience. I had never been to an airport of this magnitude before, so I had no idea what to expect. I knew, though, being in LA, there would be an enormous mixture of culture and diversity among people I saw there. Because our layover was somewhere between 4 to 6 hours, we had some time to kill and had to stop at one of the airport restaurants for at least one meal. No big deal. They served the same fast food that I had on multiple occasions. The line was pretty long for the food we decided on, so we prepared ourselves to be standing in the same line for a good 20 to 30 minutes. We were surrounded by people, but everyone I had seen in the airport so far had minded their own business, and nobody seemed to care what anyone else was doing. Nobody. Except for this one old man I spotted amongst the bustling crowd. Something about him seemed strange, and so since I had nothing better to do, I observed him. Only moments after seeing him, shifting his eyes shadily from person to person, he spotted me, and I quickly averted my gaze to everyone or anyone else but him. Luckily, he didn't notice my staring, but once I felt his gaze lift from me, I, with more stealth, decided to watch him some more. He seemed anxious, like he was looking for someone, but not with good intentions. He was also carrying a small, over-the-shoulder bag that looked somewhat medical. Standing slightly behind a pillar, he kept looking in my direction, me making sure to watch with my peripherals when I noticed his head turning towards me, and it really started to creep me out. This continued all the way through my family and I ordering, waiting for, and getting our food, which took about 35 minutes. Needless to say, I was now starting to observe this guy for more cautionary reasons. We chose to sit at a little half booth, half regular chair table that extended along the middle of the dining area, with more tables set up next to ours along the entire length. Once we were settled into our spot with our food, who do I see moseying over to our table? This time, obviously and nervously staring at my brother and I. It was that same old man. His eyes were wide, and the expression on his face just read pure guilt, like he had or was going to do something that he didn't want anyone else to see. I was sitting on the booth side of the small square table, and my brother and dad were sitting on the opposite side in the regular pull-out chairs. The small table next to ours, maybe only about 1 feet of distance away, was unoccupied, and the old man proceeded to slowly lower himself into the chair on the side my brother and dad were on, the entire time very nervously shifting his gaze from me to my brother, back and forth. By now, my heart was starting to race a little because, being a young female, even with my father and brother, I was starting to get seriously creeped out. The man very slowly took off his little shoulder bag and placed it carefully on the ground next to him, still holding his obvious, still oh so nervous stare on my brother and I. I made sure to glance at him in the eyes to make sure he knew I saw him sitting there. I tried to give a polite smile, but the nervous look on his face didn't leave. A smile was not returned, and he quickly averted my eye contact, as if to try and play it off. My hands were now shaking and sweating, and my heart was beating faster and faster because this guy was creeping me the fuck out, and had some serious ulterior motives. There was no food on his table, he had no luggage save the one bag he had on the floor, no bigger than a Kindle. His eyes were wide and shifty, his hands clenched on the tabletop, and his body was turned 3/4 towards our table, only a foot away. He knew I saw him, but I pretended not to notice his foot ever so slowly inching his small bag towards the underside of my brother's chair. His fingers were nervously tapping the table, and he was looking around the room, trying to act inconspicuous. Now, I could hear my heartbeat thumping in my chest, and I was wondering what the fuck was up. Thoughts were flooding my head about what could possibly be in that bag, and why he was sliding it towards us. Because I'm a pansy when it comes to confrontation, I immediately texted. I texted both my dad and my brother about the small bag being pushed further and further under my brother's chair by the medical shoed foot of this old coot. Neither of them noticed, so I decided to obviously move my head and shoulder to show that I was looking under the table at this man's leg and bag that were now directly under my brother's chair. I had hoped that this would have made the old man uncomfortable for being caught, but all he did was freeze in the act, almost as if he was pretending to do the old, "if you don't move, they won't see you" act. I made a little bit of a face and went back to pretending not to notice again. Now, he was slowly sliding the bag back towards himself. Once it reached a reachable distance, he scooped it up off the floor and, with shaky knees and elbows, lifted himself to his feet and stumbled away just as he came. Immediately after, I told my dad and brother the whole thing, and they brushed it off like it was nothing. We talked about it and think maybe he was trying to complete a trade or something, thinking we were who he was supposed to meet. I also thought maybe it was for a TV show or something to get reactions from people, but I was looking around for cameras just to be sure and saw nothing. Who knows? Possibly a close call. My friend and I, both males, went to some fast food maybe around 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. one night. We were both seniors in high school at the time, and I'd gone to this place to eat often. The two of us chose to eat outside, away from others, and it was basically just the two of us outside talking and eating. That's when this guy decided he would come by, sit down with us, and join us in the conversation. He was dark-skinned, brownish for the most part, must have been in his 20s. He seemed like any average person. Nothing about his appearance was unsettling. This individual sat down with us for what was probably 10 minutes. Then he asked if one of us could give him a ride to some place. He said he didn't have money, so he couldn't get a cab or bus. He also wasn't really specific on where he needed to go. He just said he needed a ride to go meet up with some friends. His vagueness made me not believe him. I declined giving him a ride, but my friend seemed to be caught a little off guard and didn't want to make this guy upset, so he said he would. Before I continue on from here, I want to include a part of a conversation the three of us had earlier before he asked for a ride. We were talking about video games, and the guy said he didn't really know much about it. Then, as the conversation continued a few minutes later, he started going into details about video games and what he enjoyed about them. 1 minute, he didn't know about the new video games coming out, and then he suddenly did. Strange. He also asked my friend and I where we lived and where we went to school. We answered, giving him the name of our school and the general location of where we lived, not giving out addresses, however. Why did this guy lie about knowing about video games? Why did he want to know where my friend and I went to school and where we lived? Now back to when my friend said he would give this individual a ride. After my friend said yes, the guy got up and walked away to talk on the phone. I found it weird that he couldn't just sit there with us and talk on the phone. Was there something he needed to keep a secret? While he got up and walked away, I asked my friend if he was getting unsettling vibes from this guy. He agreed that something didn't seem totally transparent about him. Everything he asked us seemed like he was setting us up for something. He wanted to know where we lived, where we went to school, and we believed this video game conversation was a way for him to see what things we owned. We didn't think much of answering his questions at first, but it just seemed to not add up. How did this guy get here without a car? Why didn't he have money? Wouldn't you plan ahead for something like that? We decided that we were going to leave and not give this guy a ride. Overall, we felt this was not a good situation to be in, so we made a plan to get out of the predicament before he returned. By the time the guy finished his phone call, he came back over to where we were. I then faked getting a phone call from another friend. I told my friend that I was with that we were able to head over to our other friend's place, this being a lie, so this was our ticket out. My friend then told the stranger that he couldn't give him a ride anymore. We both got up and started leaving, but the guy was clearly upset. He seemed really ticked off and said things like, "Nah, man, you can't just back out on that. You need to help me out." In the end, we left and nothing bad happened. The two of us may have been overreacting, but the more we thought about it afterwards, the whole thing just didn't seem right. We feel he was going to take us somewhere to rob or, God forbid, kidnap us. We also were worried that by getting our school information, he might find out more about us, especially since our high school only had a total of 500 students. It would probably be easy to find us. We don't know if we were ever in any trouble, but it was possibly a close call. You girls are always teasing me. This happened 6 or 7 years ago when I was 18. I was hanging out with one of my best friends at the time. We'll call her A, and she was only a year younger than me. We're both females. I'm from Hawaii, and there's a fast food chain here called Zippy's, where you can order local food and sit down inside and eat. One Friday night, we decided to stop by Zippy's and eat some dinner before heading to our friend's house to partake in some underage drinking. The location we decided to eat was pretty big, and it was still early in the night, so there was a good amount of people inside eating as well. We grabbed our food and sat down across from one another at a booth-like table. We were just about to finish up with our meal when a man who looked as though he had to be at least 50 years old walked up to our booth and stood directly at the end of our table. His hair was messy, he had a beer belly. There were a few noticeable holes on his shirt. He didn't exactly look to be homeless or anything like that. He just looked like someone who didn't take care of himself. I don't even remember exactly what it was he opened the conversation with, but I do remember A and I giving each other a weird look and trying to be nice or polite, in hopes that he was just a weirdo who would eventually walk away. We were both young and pretty reserved, and had no idea how to tell someone to leave us the fuck alone at that time. Then, the conversation took an uncomfortable turn. Neither A or I were wearing anything that was particularly revealing. We both had long jeans and some kind of top, but neither of us were girls to wear things that flaunted our goodies. All of a sudden, this man started rambling on and on about young girls. I remember him saying something like, "Why do you young girls always wear low-cut tops? You girls are always teasing me." At this point, A and I just kept giving each other looks in a what the fuck do we do sort of way, but neither of us said anything. After about 10 minutes of rambling, the guy looked at me and pointed at my chest and said, "See? You have nice tits. I would love to fuck the shit out of you." I'll be honest, I had absolutely no idea what to do in that situation and was freaked out to the point where I felt like I couldn't even release any words from my mouth. Not only that, but we were sitting in a booth, with the guy at the end of the table basically standing in between my friend and I. I almost felt as though we were trapped in our seats by the stranger. Finally, the closest table to us, which was a group of people in their late 20s and early 30s, caught on the fact that something weird was going on, and one of the guys said, "Hey, would you two like to come sit with us?" Only then did the weird man start to back away from the table a little bit, which gave us some space to nope the fuck out of there. We pretended to take them up on their offer in order to get out of our seats, but then just grabbed our trays and threw out our trash and ran to my car in the parking lot. The entire time we kept looking back to make sure that weirdo wasn't following us. That was the most uncomfortable I've ever been in my entire life. The worst part of it all was the fact that this man seemed totally and completely comfortable with what he was saying. He said what he said in an extremely public place, around so many people. He stood at the end of a table talking to two young girls for a good 15 to 20 minutes, or at least it felt that long, if not longer. I'm so surprised that no one tried to step in sooner. Do not become a victim of the bystander effect.